The Chiefs played a preseason game. College football is in camp and right around the corner, trying to figure out who's going to make their starting roster. I have everything that you need to know right here on the Best of Everything, presented by Charlie Hustle.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts or on our YouTube channel, all over social media, or our morning newsletter, KCSN Daily, dedicated to your Kansas City Chiefs. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What's up, guys? I'm Michaela Bennett, and this is the Best of Everything presented by Charlie Hustle. Let's get to it. The Chiefs played their first preseason game, and Mahomes played one drive. And, we really didn't expect much different. They said he was going to play a quarter. He got a drive. Okay. Well, there was a lot of other questions that kind of shook out throughout the game. The guys at KC Laboratory talk about the quarterback position and the young rookies. And, I think that's like a thing in Kansas City now, is young rookies stepping up and making some big plays. The Royals are doing it right now, and I think that the Chiefs are going to be doing it this whole season. A lot of young guys, a lot of young talent, a lot of fun guys to watch. So the guys at KC Laboratory talked about the cornerback position, who they were impressed with, what they thought from the first preseason game, what next week's going to look like, etc. So I'll let them talk about it in a little bit.
I am so hyped for these rookie cornerbacks. I'm crazy hyped for these rookie corners. So, yeah, no, it's great. We've seen positive things from all these guys. So, yeah, it just makes sense to bring it all back around to why they felt comfortable moving on from Lonnie Johnson at this stage.
Yeah, no, you're so good at all these transitions, Craig. I think, like the length of this group has played from a rookie perspective, and like you said, the IQ has played really well with Trent McDuffie. It's been fun to watch. One quick more question on the cornerback position. Do we think it's DiCaprio? And I know DiCaprio Boodle's probably got, a leg up from the slot perspective. Do we think it's DiCaprio Boodle versus Najee Johnson for the last cornerback spot? Like, I think L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Rashad Fenton, Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson are locks. Is it Najee Johnson versus DiCaprio Boodle, we think?
Listen, I'm going to say this, knowing full well how Maddie's going to take this. I don't think that we can just shove Chris Lamons out of the way here. I think that right now he is on the roster. So I think that I don't think that so I think he's on the roster. So I think it's closer to Jalen Watson, DiCaprio Boodle, and Najee Johnson are all competing for a spot. And right now, DiCaprio Boodle is the only guy that plays in the slot unless you're comfortable putting Rashad Fenton back in there.
I don't think, as good as Watson was, I don't think he's ahead of Boodle if you're starting to parse out who's making this roster, because Boodle does more. He just simply does more. He's a proven special teamer. He was called up last year to play special teams and spots for the Chiefs, so he can do it. He's played some safety for the Chiefs last year in camp. He's playing, in the nickel. He played on the outside at Nebraska, so he can play inside, outside, safety, and on special teams. I don't feel comfortable saying anybody besides, the top guys, McDuffie, Sneed, Fenton, are like the guy, and Joshua Williams I will put on there. But I will say I only really feel super comfortable about those first three definitely being ahead of him, probably Joshua Williams too, but he just does so much. And again, I know there was some hints coming out of camp today that McDuffie's getting a little bit of work in the slot, but it was just just a tiny, tiny bit of McDuffie took a rep in the slot, and then that was it. And then it was back to Boodle being your second team slot corner. I think that matters.
I'll go nuclear if Jalen Watson isn't on this team over Chris Lamons.
We all will.
Chiefs to this will commence.
This is one of the first. I said it last week. This is one of the first times where the Chiefs have enough young talent at corner that it makes no sense to keep a special teams only guy. In years past, whether you want to say the corner room was better or not with Breland and Ward and Snead and all those guys together, there wasn't the bottom end talent to justify, being upset if Lamons makes the team. This year, it's justifiable. Like, you got to be upset if they cut one of these guys.
It's happening though.
I don't think so.
I'll put it simply: if the Chiefs lean into this youth movement all year, and then Dave Tobe gets the impact to just nuke it at the end, I'm gonna lose it.
Obviously, there's a lot of questions, a lot of movement going on in the quarterback position, but BJ, Tucker, and Nick sat down on Outside the Trenches to talk about the Chiefs' first preseason game as well. They had a few other instances to talk about. They talked about the wide receiver position. And the wide receiver position, obviously, there's no Tyreek. So who's going to step up? They talked about Sky Moore, the 7th rounder. He got 11 yards. BJ, I love what he says in the beginning where he says, well, you'll see. But he says, a Chiefs fan, there's going to be so optimistic, 11 yards. The Chiefs fans can just take it and run with it. I'm one myself. So they talk about that, the offense, what it's going to look like now. A lot of young guys, again, big Kansas City thing right now, young guys. But is Nicole Hardman going to step up? Is he going to fill those shoes of Tyreek Hill? What are the veterans going to do in the offense? What are the rookies going to do in the offense? So the guys at Outside the Trenches, if you want to tune into this full show, check it out. But they talk a little bit about the offense and what the wide receiver position will look like.
Never underestimate the ability of a diehard Chiefs fan, even like myself, being able to spin the fact that he had 11 yards. And it was like, he only had 11 yards. I'm like, yeah, because they're saving him. They're not going to show like he is a 7th rounder, that they're hiding all the things that he can do for this offense. So like he has 80 yards, you could be excited. He has 10 yards, like they're just saving him. Like 'tis the season for hope. So that's where I'm going with this one.
Exactly. He got a good 34-yard kick return though. So that was
explosive.
Nice.
He showed off that burst on that. I talked about that too, like the contact balance and then the burst on the return. You could see that he's got a little juice.
Confidence with the ball. So that's huge. And hungry. 7th round, Rutgers. It's got all the stuff, tough, strong runner and confident runner. And that's what I like to see. I probably
Jersey. Jersey kid.
Double whammy. Double whammy. So East Coaster all the way, coming in the Midwest, doing his thing. Yep. So I probably gave away mine earlier, but I really like Sky Moore. The fact that he's doing kick returns, the fact that he's doing punt returns, the fact that he was a converted running back in college, played for a small school, has a chip on his shoulder. Cooper Kupp. Where was Cooper Kupp? Where did he go to school at?
Western Oregon,
right? So
like that. Is that right?
But I know it's a small school. And then Sky Moore, he's Western Michigan, right? So tough, gritty, and he's just, like I said, watching his college film, just smooth route runner. And you look at fundamentals from college. You look at these fundamentals, and it's like that's something that translates well to the NFL. Is no wasted steps. Your first 3 steps are positive. There's no false steps. You're smooth, great hands. He can do a lot, and they're already asking him to do a lot in this offense. So it's like, you kind of hide him. And then once someone gets, has a tweaked hamstring week 3, week 4, where Sky Moore comes in fresh legs. And like I said, don't discount. Yeah.
Cooper Kupp's from Eastern Washington, not Western Oregon.
Same general area.
It's all
directional state up there somewhere.
Pacific Northwest. It's all the same. But yeah, so that's why I think he's going to be the sneaky, low-key contributor. And then back to everything, we barely mentioned Nicole Hardman, and that is just nutso to me. That it's like, so he could have a great backup year or a great year as well if you consider him a non-starter or starter, depending on how you count him.
I just like the fact that the first pass went to like a 10-yard gain to Nicole Hardman after, and the KC Lab guys have talked about this a lot because they pay attention to the things that are going on, but a lot of his catches have been in and around the line of scrimmage, and they had Tyreek, and McCole has talked about not facing as much off coverage in the way that they'd kind of been played before. I think he went on, Good Morning Football or one of those national TV shows and was talking about, he is inviting people to play, not even bump and run, but just play a little bit closer to him so he can run right by them. Well, I thought it was telling that the first pass that Patrick Mahomes threw was like a 10-yard dig to Nicole Hardman to show like, hey, I can make plays that aren't just, jet sweeps and end arounds and things like that, that bubble screens, plays that are in and around the line of scrimmage. So thought that was a great sign. I think, Nick, you're exactly right. And that he's the one guy we talk about MVS, Sky Moore, talk about Juju, now Justin Watson, that Nicole Hardman's that other guy that, I mean, there was even a highlight earlier today on Tuesday of Nicole Hardman running right by. And I think it was Trent McDuffie, who has been really, really good. But Nicole Hardman just running him on it was a hitch and go and just making a play down the field. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited. Again, we talked about it at the beginning of the show, but what the offense can do, and McCall could be a huge part of it if he's making plays, intermediate, deep down the field. Like, that's going to be huge for this offense.
Obviously, it's still in training camp for the Chiefs. A lot of cuts to be made, but Carter Stanley, former KU quarterback, sat down with the guys in booth review this week to talk about what it's like to be actually in training camp, in a college camp when you're competing against your roommate, you're competing against your best friend for the same position, what it's like from a personal perspective. Are there times where you should be happy for, your roommate, your teammate, etc.? What is it like to actually, eat the same meal with the guy that you are vying against for the same starting position? What are coaches thinking as you're going throughout, camp? So Carter talks about that a lot from a personal perspective, what it was like for him as a player at KU, and also just what it was like for him as a veteran to come in with so many rookies underneath him, just kind of like understanding it a bit more. So he gives that personal insight, which I think is really important and really cool to understand as we're going through training camp right now, to realize these Kansas City Chiefs players, they are still so young. It is their first year. They are rookies. They have no clue what's going on. It is their first season, and they are competing against people that they maybe grew up playing against, maybe grew up playing with. So I think that's something really take into consideration whenever you're, thinking about what these guys are going throughout camp.
Carter, there's when you're in a QB battle and all this stuff, right? You're going against your teammates. There's that dynamic, right? Where, your guys are pushing yourselves to make each other better. You're probably also pretty close because you're all stuck in that room together. And there's a whole lot of demand with the quarterback position. I want you to speak on the dynamic between battling your friends and try to make yourself better simultaneously, but also trying to beat those guys, right? Talk a little bit about that dynamic.
Yeah, that's certainly another whole component to it. You're with those guys all year long, and it's so much more than just doing all the drills together and watching film together. Those are your lifting partners. You're running sprints together. Back in January, in my instance, I actually roomed with Peyton Bender. That was my roommate for 2 years, which definitely, was definitely weird at first, but we got so much closer, and that's what kind of made that competition, probably the easiest out of all of them, I'd say. But definitely gets weird because you're watching film after a long day of practice, and whether you had a good day or bad day, and same thing with your competition, whether they had a good day or bad day, you're just kind of sitting there and, you tally it up as a win for the day or a loss for the day. And, even in some cases you're roomed with them in the hotel that night for 3 weeks, and it definitely gets a little weird, but it's part of it.
Would there be times where you would notice something that the other guy was doing maybe wrong or could be corrected? And even early in your career, was it awkward to be to try and help people through these competitions when you're maybe facing them? And then did you ever have another quarterback kind of help you while you were competing against him?
To be honest, yeah, fall camp, the boys they're not necessarily dishing out tips. It's definitely, you know what's at stake. And let's say, coach is talking to your direct competition, and he'll mention something that he likes or doesn't like. You're taking a mental note to yourself. Okay, maybe try to pull that off, or definitely don't try to, do that move. So it's a lot of mental games and, a lot of preparation that goes into it.
Do you know who's winning? Can you tell?
You can tell, but it does kind of change. I'd say there were several times where, say you're 2 weeks in and kind of consistently every day, one guy's got a leg up on the other one. And then, that weekend you have a 11-on-11 scrimmage the whole day, kind of simulating a game. And, one quarterback does much better than the other. And you could kind of tell with the coaches, they fully flip a switch, and that next Mondays, maybe the reps are divided differently. So it definitely varies. But no, usually you can tell.
So Carter talks a lot about training camp, but we are so lucky to have one-on-one this week with Jeff Allen and Mike DeVito. Both are former NFL athletes, and they talked a lot about their times in training camp, what it was like as a rookie coming in, and you may not make the squad, you may make practice squad, you may not, and what it was like just, you come from a place where you are the best high school player in your area, you are the best college player in your area. And now you get to the professional level and everyone is just as good as you, if not better. How does that fit into, your identity? How do you handle that? Because you may not make the 53-man roster. You may not even make the practice squad. But like Jeff Allen says in this, he says there are 31 other teams who might want you. So you should give your all every single day, because even though you don't make this one team, you could make 31 other teams. There could be a call right after you get cut, right after you get released, to go join another roster. And I think that's something that's really important for these young guys to remember, that every single snap, even if you're not going to be a chief, you can go be somewhere else. You can go be a playmaker for someone else, and that your reel is your strongest resume right now, because you are ultimately determining your future based off how hard you play, how smart you play. You may not be the best athlete, you may not be, the fastest, whatever, but if you are out there hustling, you are out there giving your all, coaches are going to see that, they're going to recognize it. So Mike DeVito, Jeff Allen talked about it a lot this week on one-on-one, about what their experience was like as rookies, as well as what their experience was like as veterans. So obviously, if you're a veteran, it's a whole different mindset coming into camp. You've been through it before, you know what to expect, but veterans come in and they have to kind of watch the rookies a little bit. They have to, cheer them up. They have to give them some pep talks. So it's really interesting to see like their insight from a personal standpoint and what it was like actually in camp, the mental side of it, as well as the physical side of it.
Well, let's finish up with this. So we were talking to BJ before we hopped on and talking about this time of year and how we're starting to, and I guess it's even more so now compared to when we were there, given now that there's only 3 preseason games, this stuff happens a lot quicker. But, we're starting to get to cuts. They're starting to whittle down the roster. You start to see how the team's going to play out. It's like you talked about, Jeff, a tall tale sign is who gets reps, and what kind of reps they get during these preseason games. So I know you remember this time of year when you're talking to guys in the locker room, and I've had guys come up, younger guys saying, "Hey, I don't know if I'm going to make the team. Like, I don't know. I'm looking at the numbers." And talk to me about your experience, because this can start to be a difficult time of year where you got to be like, I didn't like to lie to guys, but sometimes you're like, man,
like older guys would tell me. Thankfully, I was a second round pick, so I had a little bit of leeway. But what I would tell any young guy that would have that conversation is, listen, man, like your film's your resume.
Right.
And you have to go out there, and you may not make this team, but there's 31 other teams out there. So make sure you go out there and you're putting your best foot forward, because someone's evaluating you. You may not work out here because of numbers. It may be a guy like me that was a second round pick, or a guy in free agency that they've made a financial commitment to that they can't let go. It's just a numbers game at that point.
Right.
But if you're a good football player and you do what you need to do, someone's going to pick you up. Whether you get on an active roster or a practice squad, you'll have an opportunity to continue playing if you do what you need to do. So don't count the numbers. Make sure you go out there and put your best foot forward and ball out.
And I remember my rookie year, I was like, there's no way I'm going to make this team. We had a ton of vets, older guys, guys I could mention that people probably remember, but Kimo von Oelhoffen and Bobby Hamilton and Sean Ellis. We had Eric Hicks on the team. All stacked locker room. And I remember thinking, there's, maybe I'll make practice squad, but there's no way I'll make this active roster. And, but still kept that mindset that you're talking about, right? Every day, just go out there and work, right? I can't worry about counting, can't worry about who's here, who's not here. All I can worry about is my resume, what I put on the field. And I remember back then we had 4 different cuts. I believe after every preseason game, there was a round of cuts. And, we got all the way to the last game playing Philly, and I was still on the roster. And I thought, wow, I might actually have a chance to do this. And that last week, right, everybody gets cut, and I was the only undrafted rookie to make the team.
That's awesome.
And I remember going in, getting into the cold tub, and in there was Brandon Moore, who was a great offensive lineman, and he made the team as an undrafted. Yeah, Brandon's the bet. He was incredible.
He was a D lineman.
He came in as a D lineman, then switched to O-line, made the team as an undrafted free agent, made the Pro Bowl, played a decade in the league. I mean, he was great. You and him, actually, you guys remind me a lot of each other now that I think about it. But I remember going into the cold tub and seeing him in there, and he said, "Hey, congratulations! That what you did is pretty cool. Like that's not easy to do." And coming from him, who he had done the same thing, it meant so much. And so I guess you're right. I just want to echo your point that's the key, right? I mean, as these young guys, and as an older guy, what you're trying to tell them is, hey, all you can worry about is what you can do every day. Are you getting better? Are you showing the coaches, the best sort of version of yourself on that field? And not only these coaches, but if you're just in an impossible spot that you can't make this team, everybody else that's looking at the roster, everybody else that's calling Andy Reid to ask about you. And Andy's going to go to bat for you if you're a good player. We've talked about that.
Good character. Be a good teammate. Good habits, good character. Stay humble, man. Like my rookie year, coming into the league and seeing really good football players lose their jobs and sometimes never get an opportunity to play again, that really wakes you up and you realize hey, don't take this for granted. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. You're going to earn it. But make sure every single day, no matter what point you are in your career, you've never arrived. Tom Brady talks about it all the time. You got to earn it every single fucking day because
that's right.
There's so many guys that want that spot. And there's so many guys that not only want it, that deserve it, but you're that guy in that spot. So don't take it for granted. Maximum effort every single day. Even those days where you don't want to do it. We joke about it.
Right.
Like it sucks you don't want to do it, but like you understand and appreciate it at the end of the day because you are in a blessed situation.
And you will regret it if you don't.
Yep.
You will regret it. I regret so much. And I've talked about how much I regret not putting in more effort. When you get done and look at it from the other side.
Put in a ton of effort, though, Mike. Like you're one of the guys that maximized your talent. You were an undrafted guy that made it in the league for damn near a decade.
Yeah. You know what it is?
That's unbelievable.
I appreciate that, Jeff. I look back and there were a lot of times that I made excuses. There are a lot of times that I said, I don't need, I'm with I got to spend time with the family. That was always a big, I got to spend time with the family. I've been retired for 6 years now and I see them 365, 24/7, I mean, there's nowhere to get away from everybody here. I see them all the time.
Yeah.
And I love them, but like, that was always an excuse. And I look back and wonder damn, if I would have just really sold out. I mean, I sold out to an extent, but if I really would have sold out, how much better could I have been?
Speaking of veterans, the guys at 3 Moss sat down and talked about K-State football and Deuce in the running back position. What is the running back room going to look like this year for K-State is the big question. I think that there's a lot of different scenarios that could happen. And maybe they're trying to take away some responsibilities from Deuce. Maybe they're trying to get him away from being such a blocking back. So many different scenarios could happen. So the guys at 3 Mall, Cole, Derek, and John sat down and talked about their perspective of what K-State fans should expect. Should they be happy right now? Should they be worried? What is going on in the running back position?
I'm glad you guys mentioned Taylor Potier coming back on the offensive line because I think it's a massive boost. I mean, there was a ton of buzz about him last year. And so getting him back in there, I think will be something that really helps offset some of the losses on the offensive line as well. I don't have many concerns there at all. When we're talking about the running game overall in general, set aside, I guess, the Deuce Vaughn storyline for right now, because as silly as this is, I think the bigger question on everybody's mind is, all right, who's RB2? I mean, there are some names here, but what do they actually have without Joe Irvin, without Jacardier Wright? What do they actually have at running back to spell Deuce a little bit? Or if you're going to use Deuce out in the slot, I mean, who can be there for a running back actually in the backfield? So I'm going to open it up with that as the question here, DY. How confident should K-State fans be in the battle that's going on right now for running back 2? And I don't know. I mean, you can tell by the tone of my voice where I'm at with it. It's a little troubling. If you think about anything happening to Deuce, God forbid, which he's been extremely durable, and I think that helps. But some freak accident, something can happen. We've seen it happen with Skylar Thompson multiple times. How tough of a situation would K-State be in with what's left there at running back behind it?
I sense that they feel pretty good about Anthony Frias and DJ Giddens. I really do. I sense that there's a comfort level there. The problem, so I don't really think that there's a problem in the backfield for this year per se. I think that the issue probably lies in the future when Deuce is gone, just because, well, they only have 3 running backs on scholarship now that Devin Weathers has left the program. So this year, probably not a problem. You get one injury, then it gets a little hairy, I would say, but even they'll talk up their walk-ons as well. But I think they view Anthony Frias as the perfect complement to Deuce Vaughn because he can kind of shoulder some of the responsibilities that he's well-versed in, or kind of the ones that they'd like Deuce not to take on himself, I think, right? The pass blocking, the short yardage, run between the tackles type stuff. I think they offered and added Anthony Frias because his game kind of is conducive to those roles. So I think they view him as a very good complement to what Deuce Vaughn provides, so that they can maybe, shed Deuce of some of those responsibilities and roles that he was also taking on the past couple of years. Because you have to think, even though he had Joe Irvin and he had Jacardia Wright, when you have those two, those are guys that were pretty inexperienced and they were just guys to just give the ball to as well. I mean, Deuce had to do the blocking, the in between the tackles running, so to speak, and all of that. So with Frias, they can take some of that responsibility off his shoulders. That's what they feel like. And with DJ Giddens, I'd hate to even make the comparison because it's lofty standards. But we're probably talking someone in the talent range, and he's got to realize it, and it has to come to fruition. And that means, a lot of the mental stuff and all that stuff. But he probably is in the talent range of Mike McCoy. Like, they think he's that special of a skill set, that special of a talent. Got to get the light bulb to come on. Got to crack the code to unlock some of that. And I don't think that's totally happened yet. But when we're talking about upside and potential, I think he's in that aura.
Yep. And look, we asked Deuce about the backup running backs at Big 12 Media Days, and he lit up when he talked about DJ Giddens and the talent level. If he can realize his potential, it's ultimately going to come down to the playbook and picking up the comfort level in the offense for him. But obviously a big, powerful running back out of Junction City that the coaching staff really likes. The talent is certainly there, very strong and physical. Deuce talked about, I think, him squatting over 400 pounds. So it's all there. It's just, he's got to pick up the playbook. He's a redshirt freshman. You like the Frias pickup. I think one of the interesting things here, guys, that will come about is we talk about the offense hurrying up and going from 58 plays per game into the low 70s. Well, that means you're probably going to have to rely on your backup running back a little bit more than you did in the past, because you're going to be running an increase of 13, 14 more plays per game, and you don't want Deuce out there for all of those. So there's going to be more snaps where there's either empty backfield or you're going to have a DJ Giddens or Frias out there on the field. So that'll be interesting. And look, you hate, though, to take Deuce off the field in passing situations because he's such a dynamic pass catching threat. And so it'll be interesting how they do it, but they're going to need a guy to step up and take a little bit of the burden off of Deuce. I mean, last year, the second leading rusher on the team was Joe Irvin with 322 rushing yards. If they can get 300 yards plus from one of the backup running backs this year, I think you feel decent about that. And I think the other thing, guys, just on the running game in general, it'll be really interesting what they do with Adrian Martinez in the rushing game. This is a guy that's averaged over 500 yards a season running the football. All 4 years at Nebraska, he was 500 yards or over in rushing. But you know that Colin Klein knows that the grind that running attack has on a quarterback. Colin Klein felt it firsthand, and it sounds like he doesn't want to run the quarterback as much. Adrian doesn't want to run as much. That's partially why you picked this offense. And for health, you got to keep Adrian Martinez healthy, so you don't want him taking a lot of hits. So it'll be interesting the number of QB-designed runs that they have baked in for Adrian. If you look at Nebraska, a lot of his big runs were in scramble situations when he busted big runs. I could see that still being certainly a big part of his game, but I would not want to see a ton of QB-designed runs for him where he's taken a lot of hits just because of the backup quarterback situation.
There was not that many for Skylar Thompson. So I don't think that's something they love to do. I think it's like a little bit of a weapon they'd like to have in their back pocket for meaningful situations. But they haven't really leaned on it in a very intensive manner, and really in any given year since taking over at Kansas State. And I know that was a different offensive coordinator, but it's same head coach and, a lot of the same offensive staff. And with DJ Giddens, I know some people were like, well, simplify it and just give him the ball. And that's fair. And you can say that. It's a lot easier to say that than do it, because if that's the way you want to rock with him, guess what? The other team knows exactly what you're going to do when he comes into the game then, because that was part of the problem with Jacardi Wright as well. So I think with him, it's about him getting a lot more vast knowledge, a wider array of knowledge, so that when they bring in DJ Giddens, they're not tendency prone to know exactly what to have the other team know exactly what they're going to do. They want to be able to run the entire playbook with all three backs. So the other team is not, chomping at the bit, knowing exactly what you're going to do because you made yourself so predictable.
I think a team that has a lot of questions this year is Mizzou. And Mizzou in their running back position and their wide receiver position, there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of questions to be answered. The guys at Mizzou, the guys and Maggie, I should say, at Mizzou, that's who talked about the offense at Mizzou, offensive line, wide receiver, running back positions. They have some newcomers at Mizzou that are coming from some smaller schools, one from Truman State. And Maggie makes a great point. She says, the stats that you had at Truman State, this is not an SEC school. It's not against SEC defenses. So what are these young guys, coming in, what are these transfers coming in going to do at an SEC school? What is it going to look like? Are they going to be able to perform just like they had at their old schools? So they talked about that a lot. Gabe and Tucker gave their input as to what Mizzou offense is going to look like, what it should look like. I think there's a lot of questions in Mizzou camp right now with Mizzou fans, with I think even Mizzou coaching has a lot of questions right now to still try and figure out what their roster is going to look like heading into season.
Talked a lot about the defense last week, just because I think that's kind of a big topic, but I think the wide receiver and running back rooms are very interesting. The two position groups that we could talk about, I could probably talk about the offensive line for a while too, but the amount of talent that's in the running back room and in the wide receiver room is very exciting. And I want to start with the running backs because they brought in a couple transfers. The first one, Nathaniel Pete. He's from Rockbridge. He's from Columbia, and he comes back from Stanford after having a pretty decent season. Led Stanford in rushing with 404 yards. Now, the Cardinals were not very good last year. I think they were 3-9.
Hey, they beat USC, right?
They did. So he had an 89-yard run, I think, in that game too against USC. So he played well against those guys. He was named to the Doak Walker Award watch list. So that's not nothing. What do you think about the transfer coming in? Nathaniel Pete, already this camp's kind of getting into things. What do you think about him, Gabe?
Yeah, well, he hasn't practiced much. We asked Drink yesterday. I asked him about the running back position, and his answer basically, he kind of hesitated. I don't think they have any idea. Pete had I don't know exactly the details. It was the first time I'd ever heard he wasn't in practice one day, and we asked him, and Eli said, yes, he's hydrating.
Oh.
It was hot. Don't get me wrong. I was hot standing out there. I needed to hydrate when I got home, and I didn't even do anything. But, it's obviously a little bit more. I don't know what was going on, but that was just something I'd never heard before. Tavares Jones, literally first carry in live action in his college career, scores a touchdown from like the 4-yard line, then pulls up and grabs a hamstring. Hasn't, I think, really practiced full since then. Eli said yesterday, Taj Butts was starting to do some good things. And then he had, and this is what I found, every player who's got anything going on in Missouri's camp this year has a soft tissue injury. So, that could be, it's gotten to be hockey where it's upper body or lower body.
I was
injury,
about to say hockey.
I
was about to say that too. I'm kind of interested in seeing Cody Schrader, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I know he was an All-American at Truman State. Ran over 2,000 yards, 24 touchdowns. I'm kind of interested to see what he can do. It makes me a little nervous because Truman State is not does not play an SEC schedule. It's
Right.
different. And
I did see some "We
It's
want
different.
Bama" signs in Kirksville.
Right. I'm excited to see if he can win the battle, or if we're looking at more of a three running back rotation.
Well, I said a couple weeks ago, like, find somebody that looks at you the way Missouri fans look at a walk-on running back. And that does not mean Cody Schrader can't play. He very well might play. I don't know. He might start week one, honestly. Drinkwood said yesterday he's the most consistent guy in camp, but I still have a little PTSD from Drink telling us all last offseason, there's a role for Michael Cox on this team. I don't know what that role was. It was not carrying the football very much, so it's just an uphill battle for a walk-on guy to get it. I'm curious, and I don't have an answer to this, but like, I thought Elijah Young looked good last year when he carried the ball. I was pretty impressed, but he really couldn't get on the field much until they had no other option in the bowl game. And, Drinkwood said again the other day, he needs to be more consistent. Like, I just kind of get the feeling there's something that they don't love about him.
Yeah, and that's something that could very well be possible. In the bowl game, he had 13 carries, 75 yards, 5 catches for 32 yards against Army. So a decent day at the office when he was forced to play, when he was put in there, when he had to play. As we mentioned last week, Brady Cook didn't have, Tyler Beatty in that bowl game. He had Elijah Young in that bowl game, which played well, everything like that. I do think the Cody Schrader transfer is very, very fascinating. He was a D2. I think he led D2 in all of rushing yards, and he plays in the GLVC, which is it's a tough conference, but it's also not the toughest Division II conference that there is. He was, I think that just having a guy like that that you can have a rotation. You're almost seeing this a little bit with the Chiefs, right? You've seen a few guys that can do a little bit of everything, and I think that's kind of what you got with this running back room that can do, maybe the harder runnings, the pass blocking, the third down back. You're going to see that a little bit, I think, with this group.
Yeah.
And here's the thing,
a few
guys.
of them. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, does it matter? I mean, does it matter who starts? It is the most replaceable position in college football, right? There's going to be a guy back there.
Well, this week, the best of everything is all football, because we are in football season mode. And what better way to round out the show than with the Beyond the Game show with Dick Vermeil this week. That's right. Dick Vermeil joined the guys at Beyond the Game to talk about his experience coaching, what it was like from a coaching perspective in camp. We got a lot of insight from former players. Jeff Allen, Mike DeVito talked about their experience in training camp as a player. And the guys at KU talked to Carter about, his former experience as a player. But Dick Vermeil talks about what it's like to be a coach, building those relationships, trying to figure out what it's like on that side of the lines, I should say, and what it's like to delegate those roles, to build those relationships, and also to, kind of build your roster as you're going through out training camp. There's, a whole coaching staff that is trying to figure things out just as much as the players are trying to figure things out. So Dick Vermeil gives a lot of good insight with Kendall Gannon and Lamont Winston this week on Beyond the Game.
When you look at special teams coaches, that's the only coach that really interacts with every single position on the team, right? Yep. And so my question is, when you were in that position, is that where you kind of honed your natural skills of building relationships? Because you had all kind of guys, right?
Good question. And then no question, I think that helps. My whole thing developed from high school coaching. I just, every day you'd be with those kids and you'd see what a statement or a positive statement can do to help a kid and what a negative statement can do to hurt a kid. And you keep working on these different things with players to help them get better, help them be better students, help them be better young men. And you go into junior college, now you're working with a bracket year or two older, and they have the same issues and you have the same process. So all I did as I grew in coaching is mature the process and keep studying. And I had the opportunities to work with, I have coached with on the same staff 29 different guys that carried the title NFL head football coach.
Wow.
When they were one, after they were one, or later became one. And I learned so much from all those guys. And by the time I came back after being out of coaching for 14 years, I couldn't be the coach style that I was when I left. When I left, I was at UCLA. I ran my own offense, called my own plays, coached my own quarterback. Yes, I had people with titles, but I was involved in everything. And when I left for 14 years, I couldn't do that when I came back. So now I had to decide who I delegate things to and who I designate things to. When I designate Lamont Winston, your player program, do it. I don't go in there and tell you how to do it. In fact, I learn about how you do it as we work together. You know, I don't think we ever said, geez, don't do it that way. I learned from you. But that same thing can happen if you have a proper communication system with your coaches. And then, you know, when all of a sudden you got to say, you know, I will move the scheme this way, or let's run the ball more, or let this and this is how we're going to practice. You know, I never lost the organization of the practice, the tempo, the pads, the treatment by assistant coaches. You know, I controlled all of that, and it tried to create an atmosphere in which everybody enjoyed working, and an atmosphere in which all players enjoyed being coached. Even tough coaching, tough love coaching, or happy fun coaching, you know. So yeah, it can be done. And every once in a while, you know, Lamont, every once in a while, blow my stack.
For sure. Absolutely. So
You have to get after somebody.
At what point, like when you were out that 14 years, I know you just gained a lot. You used to tell us all the time, like, you kidding me? I get to go to all these practices. I get to see how everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
Right. When did you start seeing or hearing about player programs and kind of seeing what was in place that wasn't in place when you left football, but was in place when you came back? And I know when you started at the Rams, you had, you know, Kevin was there, but was there some point in that 14-year space where you said, okay, that has value, so I'm going to, you know, I'm going to have that position at my next stop? When did that happen?
In that 14-year space of being out of it, remember, I'm on a practice field and in a meeting room all season, all around the country, college level and NFL level. There's some generalizations that I took from those 14 years. Number one, people want discipline. As much as they'll complain about strictness, and hey, it was mentioned the other day at the round table when the kid, excuse my mind, senior moment here, from Jacksonville. Yeah. Tony Baselli said, you know, I guy didn't really care for Coach Coffin when he coached me, but boy, do I care about him now. What he taught me, and he put, you know, what he taught me, and what a better player he made me, what a better coach, what a better person he made me, you know. And I have sat in NFL locker rooms next to a great player and sit there and see a guy walk by and he say, Coach, if I were head coach, I wouldn't have that guy on my team. He says, we don't have any discipline problems because we don't have any discipline. Right. I got him say that to me. I said, how can you have discipline problems when you have no discipline?
Dick Vermeil talks a lot about discipline right there. And in football, whether you're a college football player right now in training camp, or you are a professional football player in training camp, discipline is the biggest thing, I think. And I think for the Chiefs especially, discipline is what is going to get them back to the AFC Championship and ultimately the Super Bowl. I think, you know, in previous years, there has been a lack of discipline sometimes. I think maybe by a certain position, certain players that are no longer with the team, maybe they still are, there has been a lack of discipline. And that discipline is what is going to get you a consistent win every single week. Whether you're the better team or not, I think the Chiefs were the better team last year. And ultimately, they just didn't come through. And I think that discipline is what is going to get the Chiefs back to the Super Bowl this year. I think discipline in college football is what is going to make the biggest difference with Mizzou, K-State, and KU. So discipline. So this has been the best of everything presented by Charlie Hustle. Again, Charlie Hustle is amazing. Check out all of their clothing. All of us hosts are wearing the Charlie Hustle shirts. They're great. They will be having KCSN brand coming out, and you should check them out online. Get your own right there. But thanks again for tuning in. Every Saturday, we will be here to give you everything you missed from the Kansas City Sports Network. And once again, I'm Michaela Bennett, and this is the best of everything.